Shalom, shalom. Thrilled to be here with all of you. Thank you to Erez and everyone at the back end of the festival. Thank you, Hashem. Wishing everyone a beginning of the month of Sivan, that it should be the most wonderful month of receiving the Torah, of connection, of strength. In today's session, we're going to be learning about the concept of believing in ourselves. I wrote my PhD thesis about this. If you Google believing in oneself and then write my name or just my last name, Hundert, Hundert, you can find it. Or you write the name of my university, it's easier to remember maybe, Concordia. I wrote it about the perception of Reb Nosson of Breslov, who was the primary student of Rabbi Nachman, on enlightenment, meaning to say on the modern times that we're in right now, where it seems from my research that Reb Nosson understood that for his Rabbi Nachman and for himself, the biggest challenge of the modern times we're living in now, bigger than any theological issues of believing in God, of believing in religion, the biggest challenge is to believe in ourselves. Society somehow became so large and so blind, and our own value having nothing to do with what job we have or how much money or how famous we are, just our value as human beings is becoming, I think, harder and harder to find. The story of how faith in oneself became a major part of Breslov Chassidut began on a dark and stormy night. Okay, maybe it wasn't so stormy, but it was at least dark. It was a late at night on the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah in 1806, if I'm remembering correctly. And Rabbi Nachman had just finished teaching the kind of Torah that can be so frustrating to hear. He just finished teaching Torah 86 in the second section of Likutei Moharan, his most major book, in which he taught that if one's divine service, if one's life, trying to be connected to God, feels heavy, if everything I do feels heavy, that's a sign that I'm missing, that I'm lacking in faith. And Reb Nosson, his primary disciple, his chassid, his close confidant, came in to speak with him that night after he gave over that lesson. And as is recorded in Sichos Erran number 140, Reb Nosson says, Amadati lefanav kemish domain. I was standing in front of him in shock. And my thoughts were just running around. Says Reb Nosson, because it seemed to me that I have some faith. Once again, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov was one of the greatest Hasidic rabbis, born in 1772, died in 1810. And his student Reb Nosson, born in 1780, died in 1844. So this is Reb Nosson standing before Rabbi Nachman. They're both in their 20s, both great luminaries. Reb Nachman just taught that if you feel heaviness in your divine service, it means you don't have enough faith. The kind of thing that can just drive a person crazy. And Reb Nosson is standing before him feeling driven crazy. It seems to me that I do have some faith. So why? Even for him, for the great Reb Nosson. Thanks to him, we have all the written teachings of Breslov Chassidut. Why does it feel so heavy for me if I think I'm a believing Jew? Why does my divine service still feel heavy? The Amar Belashon Ge'ara K'tzat, and Rabbi Nachman answered him in a kind of a Ge'ara in Hebrew means sort of like a roar, a kind of a zetz, as they say in Yiddish, a bit of a push. And he said to him, and here Reb Nosson, which is rare, Reb Nosson records the original Yiddish words that Rabbi Nachman used. He said, first in Hebrew, he said, if you have faith, hosti in dir keine munanist, but in your own self, you're missing faith. So this, I believe, the way Reb Nosson writes about it also, blew Reb Nosson's mind, because what does believing in myself even mean? But it's about believing in God. And because I'm not believing in myself, that's why my whole divine service feels so heavy. And Rabbi Nachman immediately spoke about a certain piece in the Talmud, which Rabbi Nachman interpreted to be speaking about this, which says, this is Sota, page 48b, that what is it that causes for the righteous, for tzaddikim, for great, great people, that their reward in the coming world becomes smaller, is katnut shehaya bahem be'atzman shelo ha'aminu bahem be'atzman, that they have a smallness of faith, the Talmud says, a smallness that they had in themselves. So the words of the Gemara, the words of the Talmud, the smallness that they had in themselves, that they didn't have faith. And Rabbi Nachman understood this to mean that it's not just about a lack of faith. After all, the Talmud is speaking of these people as tzaddikim, as completely righteous. How could you have somebody who's totally called a tzaddik by the Talmud, and yet the Talmud says they're not getting their full reward, they're not reaching their full spiritual potential because they're lacking in faith? Faith is so central, so basic. How is this possible? So Rabbi Nachman understood, and it feels like Rabbi Nachman is almost waiting for Reb Nosson to come in with this protest. He taught this teaching, if your service of Hashem feels heavy, it's because you're missing faith. You have a lack in faith. And he was almost like waiting for Reb Nosson. Seems to me he was waiting for Reb Nosson to barge in and say, Rebbe, what do you mean? Why does my divine service feel so heavy? I believe. And the Rebbe said, you believe. You don't believe in yourself. Wow. And then he had this piece of Talmud to prove the concept that tzaddikim, it's possible for somebody who's totally righteous, but still to be missing this dimension of faith in themselves. Fascinating. And Reb Nosson then, when he recorded this obviously made a huge impression on him. And when he recorded it in Sichot Haran, the conversations of Rabbi Nachman, Sicha, conversation number 140, Kuf Mem, he said, I could explain this, that what this means is that they didn't believe. What does this mean? Believe in yourself. I Googled it, by the way, just before coming on. I Googled believe in yourself. It got almost 2 million hits. It's a popular concept today to believe in yourself. But what does this mean for Rabbi Nachman and for Reb Nosson? Does it just mean to have more self-confidence? It's much deeper than that. And Reb Nosson writes here what it means. That even the most righteous people, their lack of faith in themselves actually means that their faith in God is missing something. faith in myself is part of faith in God. How does that work? Shelo ha'aminu b'Kadosh Baruch Hu shehu tov l'kol v'hem chashuvim u'gdolim beinav yitbarach. They don't believe that God is so infinitely great, that God even loves me and cares for me, and the things that I do actually matter. And I myself, even before I do anything, am beloved and actually matter. It's possible to be a fully, religious person, dot all your I's and cross all your T's and get everything perfect, and miss this dimension. It's not just about being more self-confident. It's how big do I really believe God is. Is God not big enough to love me? It's a huge, huge thing for us to ponder. If I really, really believe in God, then it follows that I have to really, really believe in myself too. And the content, what does it mean to believe in yourself? Rav Nosson explains this elsewhere in his great magnum opus, Likutei Halachot, Hilchot Pikadon Hey, paragraph Zayin. Faith in oneself is made out of two things. It means to believe that I have inherent value before I do anything. I have inherent value to God, and that the deeds that I do actually matter and actually are actually create divine pleasure and are significant in an ultimate way. As Rav Nosson explains, I'll give you a bit more in his words. The haklal, the concept here is sha'adam tzarich shehiyeh lo emunah be'atzmo shegam hu chaviv be'einei Hashem Torah. A person must believe in themselves that they too are beloved in the eyes of Hashem. Ki lefi gedulat tovato shel Hashem yitbarach, according to the great goodness of God. Gam hu gadol v'chashuv be'einav yitbarach. I too, person has to make this real for themselves. I too. And it's always this kind of a thing, like the Talmud says, you could be a tzaddik and still not have this. And as we'll speak about in a few minutes, even Rabbi Nachman himself was working on this. It's always a bit of a surprise that I really am important, that the things that I do matter. Ukvar mevuar inyan zeh kama pamim. And the Reb Nosson goes on to speak about humility. That humility does not mean to turn yourself, as they say in Yiddish, into a shmata. It does not mean to think of yourself as a nothing, as worthless. That's not called true humility. And true humility is something also that we find in the teachings of our sages. In Pirkei Avot, Hillel said, "Im ein anili mili." If I will not be for myself, who will be? No one else will be. Like I tell grooms and brides on the day of their weddings, special people getting married today, if you don't pray, no one else will pray for your home the way you can. Im ein anili mili. If I will not be for myself, who will? Uchshani la'atzmi mani. But if I'm completely for myself, what have I become? There's always that danger of ego on the other side. Ve'im lo achshav eimatai. And if not now, when? And this last part is about the urgency of this issue. If not now, when? So on the one hand, it's like the edge of a knife. On the one hand, no one else is gonna take care of being Leibish if I'm not gonna really rock and roll being Leibish. On the other hand, if I'm completely just only a Leibish advocate in the world, what have I become? I could turn into some plastic, talking head. There's my head talking on the screen. And in Loachshav, it's not now when. And what's fascinating about this teaching is that it's all phrased in questions, and it's all phrased in the first person. So we see this depth of how Torah relates to this issue. It's what constantly burning. I have to somehow solve this. I have to somehow be. And hundreds of years, even a couple thousand years after those words were first uttered by Hillel, Rabbi Nachman and Reb Nosson kind of sharpening it in terms of understanding faith. That faith itself, faith in God, as a component of faith in myself. Faith in God as a component of faith in myself. Is God too small in my conception to care about me? That means, right? There's something wrong with my perception or my ability to let go of any limitedness to God if I'm so stuck on feeling that God can't be God really cares about. And as we saw, the Talmud says, even tzaddikim, even truly righteous people struggle with this, and they don't reach their spiritual potential because they live just, being religious and not rocking and rolling their lives. That's I'm using, Talmud didn't say rock and roll. So on the one hand, the urgency is so huge. On the other hand, even the greatest of people struggle with it. Fine, we're coming close to Shavuot now. It's going to be, we know that Shavuot is the yahrzeit, is the anniversary of the passing of King David. And in Judaism, the day that a soul leaves this world is a day when you can very, very much connect to that soul. Every year on that calendar date, the Hebrew calendar, you can connect to the energy of that soul. King David is so crucial for us to be able to really receive this whole system, this whole Torah that feels so big and so impossible a lot of the time. And I'm so small, and do I really matter? King David struggled with this. King David sang about it and cried out about it. And a lesser known aspect, we were just learning it last night. King David had a friend called Hushai Ha'arki. King David had a friend named Hushai Ha'arki who helped him to strengthen his faith in himself. See, as he said, believing in ourselves, this is a struggle for everybody, even the greatest of tzaddikim, and as I'll tell you soon, even for Rabbi Nachman himself. And as the Talmud says, even tzaddikim, the way Rabbi Nachman understood that piece of the Talmud. And they're missing in faith. What kind of faith could a tzaddik, could a completely righteous person be missing? And they could be missing in believing in themselves and just go through, get everything perfect, but not be shining, not be rocking. Because it's hard. Like Hillel said, if I'm not for myself, who will be? And if I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? And it's a burning issue. So King David also struggled with this, and particularly, and this is something that hits us really hard. In our generation also, King David had such a falling. I'm not going to get into the story now, but we know the story of King David and Bathsheba, who was a married woman. ... And this was a huge black mark on King David's life. And there were many great Torah luminaries of his generation who totally rejected King David. Amish. They really rejected him. When his son Avshalom tried to make a rebellion, they joined with him. But Hushai Ha'arki stuck with David. And Rashi tells us in the book of Chronicles in Divrei Hayamim, as Hushai is called Reah HaMelech, the friend of the king, that King David came over to his friend Hushai, and he said, do you think Hashem will forgive me? Do you think Hashem will forgive me? And Hushai, the friend of David, said, and according to Rashi, one word, Ken, yes! Gewalt, we need to get by, and if I may say so, hi, with a little help from our friends. We need it. Even King David, to muster up the wherewithal, the inner gumption, the strength to keep on keeping on, even while he's crying and leaving Jerusalem. His own son is rebelling against him. Hushai, do you think I have a chance over you? Do you think I'm still in the running? Does my divine service still matter? Am I still beloved to God? Do I have a chance? We realize how much of our Judaism today depends on that one word of a friend. Yes, you can do it. You can do it! How much do we? King David, he would have stopped. Imagine, he would just, and just given up and stopped writing the Psalms, the Tehillim, and given up, and who knows? Our Judaism would be totally unrecognizable without that amazing thing of a word from a friend. So this concept of faith in ourselves is not just even something that we're fully capable of doing on our own. So as I've been saying, even Rabbi Nachman himself struggled with this. How do we know that? Well, Reb Nosson writes about this in Likutei Halachot in Birkos HaShachar Hey. Reb Nosson, I can't prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, but you tell me if you agree with me. Reb Nosson is speaking about Moses, and Betzalel. Betzalel was a teenager who was a genius, an artistic genius, and built the tabernacle, the Mishkan, the golden cherubim, the Kruvim, the ark. He was an amazing young Jew. And there was a job to build the menorah. The menorah had to be built from a single piece of gold and yet be incredibly ornate. You can read the verses about it. It had to have knobs and cups and flowers and all kinds of designs and be built from only one piece of gold. And Moshe was having trouble. Moshe was having trouble fashioning the menorah. And now there are various midrashim, various accounts in the oral Torah of how they finally managed to produce that menorah, the first ever menorah. And the midrash that Reb Nosson brings from the Yalkut Ruveni, if I remember correctly, that's the name of it, an obscure midrash, that Moshe kept trying and wasn't able to make it. And Betzalel said, Rebbe, let me try. And Betzalel made it. Now, Reb Nosson explains, how's that possible? If Moses couldn't do it, how could Betzalel, yes, do it? And he explains the following. He explains that the concept of the menorah was to give strength and light to every single soul for all generations, to never give up hope, that they can always connect to Hashem no matter what. That's quite the task. It wasn't just an issue of how do you make the gold out of one piece. It was how can it be that through me will be created a physical vessel for such powerful divine energy to give strength to every soul for all generations? You know that all these vessels were never destroyed. They're hidden somewhere underground, probably in Yerushalayim. And says Reb Nosson, writes Reb Nosson, that Moshe, because of his great humility, was unable to believe that through him, through his soul's effort within the body in this world, could create such a vessel. Moshe, he was too humble. He couldn't believe in his own ability to make the menorah. But Bezalel could believe that he could do it. Why? Not because it's me making it, because I have such a great teacher and inspiration in Moshe, and it's the energy and inspiration of Moshe's soul that's giving me the strength to make it. So we have this beautiful partnership where the person whose soul really is that big and can do it, can't see that he could do it. But the student, the chassid, if you may say, sees the greatness of the Rebbe, of the teacher, and because of his inspiration, does it himself without feeling that it's mine. I'm doing this only as a receiver of light and strength from Moshe. And Rav Nosson doesn't say explicitly that he's writing here out of a kind of a reflection of his own relationship with his Rebbe, Rebbe Nachman. But it seems very clear to me, and I hope you agree with me, that his ability to interpret this way was because he saw this in his Rebbe. Rabbi Nachman, on the one hand, has many statements of tremendous confidence. And when he said, Gewalt Zeitech nicht Yayish, and he told a small room of some 30 Yiddish-speaking Jews in a town in Ukraine, Gewalt, don't give up. And Reb Nosson wants us to know that he said the word Gewalt really long. Gewalt, don't give up. When he gave this over, it affected and is still inspiring thousands of Jews today. So on the one hand, this is a soul. How many people said don't give up in history? Hundreds, probably, thousands, millions of people said it. But when Rabbi Nachman said it, it carried such a force, such a power, such a flame, such a strengthening for all of us. And he really had this in him to strengthen all of us in such an amazing, amazing way that even he himself couldn't fully see out of humility this issue we made, and Nili. If I'm not for myself, who will be? But if I am for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? And together with the student who believed in him, and it's thanks to his student Reb Nosson that we have all of the writings from Rabbi Nachman. And Reb Nosson created this amazing kind of a menorah of his own profound insights to all the teachings of Rabbi Nachman. So you see, we all need help from our friends. This is not something you can just put on a blackboard. It's not just an abstract idea. It's an inner strength. And I hope from my heart to your heart, and in the name of all of Israel, in the name of Nachman ben Simcha, in the name of Reb Nosson of Nemirov, we can do this. We can believe in ourselves, can believe in our inherent value to God, and we can believe that our mitzvahs really are significant. So nice to be with you today. Thank you. All the best.